We're now going to continue with our program. So over the past several years, Sutton Place Synagogue has consciously marked JDAIM, Jewish Disability Awareness and Inclusion Month, really trying to say that this is something that we should see and we should focus on, we should pay attention to. And over the past several years, we've had different speakers, including our own Gabby and Harold Alper, speaking about their daughter who lives in Mishkan Tefillah in Mishkan in Brooklyn. We had speakers from JNF speaking about the role the IDF has played in creating inclusive opportunities in the Army. And today, I am really thrilled to be talking about the Tikvah program at Camp Ramah. In a moment, Benji will introduce Howard Blass, the director, who's helped us direct today's panel. But for me, as I spoke about on Minyan yesterday, the Tikvah program at Camp Ramah in New England had a tremendous impact on me when I was a kid. I was there from 1987 to 1989, and then 94 to 96. And the campers who were in the Amitzim Eidah and then the Voc Ed program beside me were absolutely a part of the community, just like anybody else. And it is so exciting to welcome members from Ramah, New England, as well as Ramah, Wisconsin, both here and on Zoom, into our community to teach us the importance of what's going on at camp and how camp can be and should be and must be not just a lab for what takes place there, but a model for how we can think even better about what we should be doing in all of our communities. So I turn it to Benji to introduce Howard.
Beautifully said, and I'll just show my cards, which is that I'm also a lifelong Ramonic and also a veteran of the Tikvah program at Ramah, Wisconsin, was on the staff for 4 summers, including as the unit head, as the Rosh Hashanah. So it was also life-changing for me, and I'm so thrilled that we're having this partnership. And I'm honored to welcome Howard Blass, who will then introduce the main event in a moment. But Howard is an award-winning journalist, award-winning educator. He does a ton of work with educating B'nai Mitzvah kids, and he's actually with disabilities and special conditions for their life cycle event. And he's actually in the process of writing a book for that. He's an award-winning educator. There's a lot to say. He visits job sites around the country to make sure that they are accessible, to make sure that the information is out there for folks to know that those places exist and are hiring people who can contribute to those companies. And something really incredible is that in 2020, Howard was part of a mission to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, which included 4 people with paraplegia and a Sefer Torah, just amongst his many credentials. And Howard, as Rabbi Ain said, served as the director of the Tikvah program at Ramah, New England for 15 years and is now the director of the National Ramah Commission's Tikvah program. And I consider him a friend and a mentor, and I'm so glad that he is with us at SPS today for this special occasion. So I invite you forward to introduce the company, and I think everyone also can come forward and fill this front row here so that it's easiest. So the participants, parents, and entourage, you can sit here and make that easier. Welcome, Howard.
So thank you very much for the great welcome. Rabbi Ain, thank you for making me feel very old, because my first summer at Camp Ramah was 1984 on staff. So you were a camper, and because I was there for...
I wasn't even a camper in 84. I was 7.
Okay. So just a few introductory comments. I'm sure everybody here knows this about your clergy, but it's not typical for a rabbi to reach out around Rosh Hashanah time when there are so many things on her mind and on Cantor Malachi's mind having to do with all the upcoming Tishrei holidays to say, oh, JDAIM is coming in about 6 months. Let's think about what our synagogue is going to do. And that really says something about the DNA of the shul. So really thank you for thinking so far in advance. You could probably tell a lot of the history of both the Tikvah program and Camp Ramah through this shul right now. You solved a mystery that I've always had. My kids have always talked about sleeping on this very floor when they've come here. I think that's one of the things that your shul has been great in doing, is hosting Camp Ramah New England, the oldest Eidah, when they come on their New York trip. So now I understand what they've been talking about. It looks pretty comfortable. So, please look downstairs on the less comfortable floor. But thank you. The reason I think you could tell the story of Tikvah through the people who are here is as follows. So the founders of Tikvah had this really crazy idea, at the time seemed like a crazy idea in the late 1960s. Believe it or not, they thought that people with disabilities should be included in a typical Jewish summer camp. And you could probably guess that did not go over very well. Nobody liked this idea, not in any of the Jewish movements. If we had a longer time, I could give you the whole history, but basically they said the normal people will leave. The Hebrew, which is Camp Ramah's big thing, is going to go way down. Of course, it's going to bankrupt the camps because of the cost, et cetera, et cetera. And two regular, everyday people who happen to be special educators in Long Island with no family connection disabilities, Herb and Barbara Greenberg, they had this idea that they should persist and that this should go on. And despite the pushback, one director, his name was Danny Edelman, Zichrono Livracha, he said, we'll take it, we'll do it, because it's the right thing to do. Like, why should Camp Ramah exist? All the values we teach if we say no to these people. And that first summer in 1970 at Camp Ramah in Glen Spey, New York, there were 8 campers with a whole range of disabilities who came as campers. And the Greenbergs spent a lot of time doing shuttle diplomacy, talking to people, reassuring them. They were very, the good news is the Greenbergs did this for 29 years. They're still alive and well. They live in Renana. I talk to them on a regular basis. They know about today's activity and can't wait to hear about it. And they were very emphatic about staying away from labels. They didn't talk about what a kid had. They talked about strengths and weaknesses. And I think that, as Rabbi Ain said, because of that, a whole generation, or thousands and thousands of people, have grown up just seeing, people with disabilities in Camp Ramah as being as natural. You said as being a camper. I would say as natural as Shabbos brownies, as natural as davening in the Chorsha in the Pine Grove. It's just, and Tikvah predates anybody who's been to camp. It's been around for a very, very long time. And I think that there are probably many dissertations waiting to be written even about Israel. I mean, how, so many shlichim, so many emissaries have come to camp over the generations that attitudes have been changed in Israel too. So why do I say that we can tell the story of Tikvah from this room? I'll tell you as follows, and when you prepare, you get sometimes blindsided in a wonderful way. So first of all, the Greenbergs started the program in 1970. In 1984, having no connection to Camp Ramah, I decided to go and work in the kitchen with my best friend from childhood. And my best friend continued to the kitchen, and I was rerouted to this thing called Tikvah that I never heard about before. And the Greenbergs thought I'd be good, so I decided to do it for one summer. One summer turned into 6 summers. There was great mentoring with them, and I kept coming back. It changed my whole career focus, and I sort of never left Jewish disabilities inclusion. I get to wear shorts and a t-shirt even at my age every summer, which is pretty cool. And that was 6 years in a row. During the course of those 6 years, and again, this is a real total surprise to me, I met some really amazing families. And the Greenbergs at the time, they were dealing with children of Holocaust survivors, okay? And that made a big impact on them. And I spoke with them recently. It really showed them about why we were doing what we did, showed them about determination, about inclusiveness. And I have to acknowledge that a very old friend, Ram Roth, his sister, Masha, was a camper of mine in those early years in the 80s. And we still have this bond. We talk about it all the time. I knew Ram's late parents coming for parent conferences during those years. And that's continued. So the 80s turned into the 90s, turned into this group of, some are current participants in our Tikvah program in New England. Some are alum and are adults. This morning, you'll be able to get a sense of what happens when people with disabilities grow up. Okay, because the good news is that people just like the rest of us, people with disabilities will hopefully start off as campers, and they'll live to their 70s, 80s, and 90s like the rest of us. So you get to hear a little bit about that. Something that happened so in Ramah, New England, which is kind of the first program, led to all these other programs. So we have a representative from another one of the camps. Every one of our Ramah camps does something around disabilities. That's sort of in the kishkas of the camp. Despite the pushback in 1970 about Ramah, New England, got to fast forward when Ramah NorCal was about to open. Rabbi Sarah Schulman and the board said, we're not going to open our doors without Tikvah there. So that's a very, very big change over the years. So again, we could talk more about what each camp does, but Ramah, New England started with a camping program. The founders said, wait a minute, people are going to need jobs when they get older. So my memories of being a counselor in the 80s was a pre-vocational training program that led to a guest house. If you came as a guest, your room would be everything would be taken care of by people with a disability. There's food services, childcare, and of course, that helps because people will go on to have jobs in the world. Some people ended up being hired as full staff. That happens in a lot of programs. In Benji and Andrea's program, some people actually work in the local community in Eagle River, Wisconsin, at Sam's coffee shop and children's museums, places like that. And late into my years, maybe 15 years ago at Ramah, New England, some families said, there's this thing out there in the world called inclusion. Ever heard of it? Would you think about doing this in camp? And we knew this happened in schools, but the idea of full inclusion in a camp, we just didn't know. There was no literature out there. We consulted with a professor who guided us, and we just took the plunge. And it turned out that we started including some campers with disabilities in the typical camping program. And the good thing is at Ramah, New England, and in all of Ramah, it's not one size fits all. There's a lot of people who have very strong ideas about people with disabilities. We said, let's talk to the families of people with disabilities, talk to the people. And for some people, a somewhat separate program is the right program. For some, being fully included. For some, being a dual citizen. That was a parent's word. In both adult, it's a good idea. And I didn't plan this, but when some of Alexa's friends saw that Alexa would be here, these are some of Alexa's friends who were in her bunk for many, many years. We'll meet Alexa. They said, we're going to come. So probably a good number of people here are Alexa's friends. So if we wanted to ask them some questions, we could do that. So, okay, so that's my story. I now, after all those years in camp, I outlasted my 4 kids as campers. They moved on, I stayed. And I actually now work, as Rabbi Ian said, we've sort of networked all of our camps. We have what's called the National Ramah Tikvah Network. So after spending 5 years in Northern California, now I only work with the different camps. I get to visit camps over the summer, bring our directors together and share practices. And I would say, talk with the overall directors, because camp has really become, this is kind of hot off the press. I think one of the things we all realized after last summer, and Rabbi Dave, you can vouch for this, I think we all realized that it's not just campers with disabilities that we have to think about. We realized that there are so many needs that every camper and every staff member has for support. And in fact, in March, all the directors, all the camper care professionals, we're all going to get together and really talk about this a lot more, about mental health and about gender and so many things. So this is really a good thing. But today, as part of, I think they've expanded, it started off as JDAIM. Now the A has a double purpose. It's Jewish Disabilities Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month. So should we bring everybody up here or just call people?
Since you're going to ask an individual question, why don't you ask a question, they can come up when they're answering, and then...
Okay, awesome. So maybe, Alexa, since I gave you so much attention, why don't you come up? We'll ask you a couple of questions, okay?
If you're comfortable, the speakers are comfortable taking their masks off when they're speaking, they're welcome to do so, but it depends on the comfort level.
Okay, so I'll ask, do you want to introduce it? Just say your name and where you live and all that stuff.
Hello everyone. My name is Alexa Taleb. I am 24 years old. My birthday is coming up. I'll be 25.
Awesome. So, Alexa, you've done so many things at Camp Ramah in New England. Can you tell everybody about the different things you've done in camp, like the different ADAs and your voced and seminar, all those kind of things? You come closer to the microphone, okay?
So Camp Ramah, being with all our friends and being with camp.
So where did you start? What adult were you in? What did you do in camp?
I started in Illinois when I was 9, and right now I'm in voced.
You want to take your mask down, or you don't feel comfortable? Alexa, you want your parents? Okay.
Well,
Okay.
that's actually
Your parents said it's okay.
Yeah.
And you agreed, so. So you were in Illinois, which is the 10-year-old ADA, and then what happened after that?
Well, I started in voced first. Yeah.
That's the job training program. For camp, okay. And what kind of jobs did you do in camp?
So we did the coffee shop. I helped sell coffee and tea, and also I did the food prep in the kitchen. I started cutting vegetables and preparing food.
Awesome. And I want to get to your business in a second, but you also got to go to Israel. So maybe you could talk about the Ramah Israel trip that you went on.
Yes, I went to Birthright. I have cousins in Israel. Being in Israel is really fun, honestly. We did tours, we hang out with friends. I had to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and climb into Masada, apparently.
And didn't you also go to Israel with your friends too? Maybe you could talk about that with Ramah.
Yes, I did went to Israel with my friends, who was staying right there. Right now, Israel is really fun being with friends. Friends are fun, and honestly, it's really nice.
Awesome. So last thing, I think we should give a plug to you. Maybe you could talk about what you do now that you're an adult. What do you do professionally?
So right now, I'm in college. I am a LIU student of LIU. I am in a JDAIM program. It's called Program Without Walls. So in JDAIM, we do a lot of things. We do a food bank. Some people do dog treats, and we eat lunch around like 12:30. We do life skills. Sometimes we do fire skills and life.
And the last thing, you can give get some free publicity for your business. So maybe you can talk about that.
Yes, I am running my own business. It's called Chili's Grown by Alexa. I make chocolate covered treats, and I have a business card if you're welcome to have one. I busted up in my house, so you're okay with that. I make chocolate covered Oreos, pretzels, K-pops, graham crackers, and s'mores.
Okay, so Truly Scrumptious by Alexa. Thank you very much. Awesome. Okay, I'll talk to some of your friends. Thank you. Awesome. Okay, so we don't want to forget about one of our really great friends who's here virtually. So Debbie Margolis, can we ask you a few questions?
Yes, hi everyone.
So Debbie, I think that you were sharing this story on TikvahNet. So we have this virtual program that we've been doing for like 60 of our alumni from the different camps virtually. And you were talking about your Ramah story, Debbie. So could you just tell us like your name and where you live and all the different things you've done at Camp Ramah over the years?
Sure. So hi everyone. My name is Debbie. I am 23 years old. I am from Westchester, New York, and I am going to tell you my list of Ramah camps. I started at Ramah Berkshires, then I went to Ramah Nyack, and then during the time I was at Ramah Nyack, I took a summer off and I went to Israel and I did Ramah Israel. And then I came back to Nyack and then I went to Ramah New England. And then I went on Ramah Seminar, which is a 6-week program in Israel. And then I returned to Ramah New England for 2 summers after that.
Thanks, Deb. What do you do now?
So right now I am a 2nd-year student at a special needs program called Chapel Haven, which is in New Haven, Connecticut, and I'm learning how to be independent. Awesome.
And I know that you and your family are very connected Jewishly. So I wonder if you could say, to what extent have you felt included in the Jewish community? And if you have any advice for people in a shul about what they could do more.
Sure. Okay. So I attended regular Hebrew school from kindergarten to graduating high school. I read Torah at my bat mitzvah, and my synagogue was flexible with bat mitzvah arrangements. I went on my synagogue teen tour to Israel, led by the rabbi. Like other teens in my synagogue, I worked at the Hebrew school for younger kids. And something that I would really like to see in synagogues is that they should have programs for people who have special needs, just like Ramah has.
Thanks, Deb. Very, very good advice. Also, I don't, if you're, I had offered if your mom wants to offer anything else. I don't know if, Michelle, if you're on, if you wanted to say anything about, from your perspective, about shuls being more inclusive. It's totally up to you.
Hi, Howard. Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and thank you very much for having us on today. I think inclusion comes straight from the Torah, just like all great ideas all seem to emanate from the Torah. And the most repeated commandment in the Torah is remember that you were a stranger in a strange land. And to me, that's about inclusion. It's about taking whoever's on the periphery and bringing them into the mainstream. And most synagogues are driven by what's in the Torah. So it's right there. And we can incorporate all sorts of things. This takes different forms. The very fact that I am speaking to you through Zoom as a guest speaker in today's program is a credit to the use of technology and opening up doors for more people for whatever reason that they physically cannot be in the synagogue building, but keeping the community connected and opening up access. And that's what synagogues can do. And this is a prime example. And those synagogues that are not embracing this technology right now, I personally think are missing the boat. I think another way that synagogues could do more is opening their doors for the vocational program. What Howard set up at Camp Ramah, New England, so many years ago was almost looking for ways to create jobs, to develop job skills for our special needs young adults. And synagogues should be looking at themselves to see what they can do. For a while, Debbie had jobs through her high school's vocational program at our synagogue. Who's counting the money in the tzedakah box? That was a great job that Debbie could practice her monetary skills, and the synagogue could tally up what was in the tzedakah box at the end of Minyan. I know someone, a young man with very limited language skills, who came to synagogue every Friday morning and worked with a custodian to set up tables and chairs because he loved moving big things. And that taught him what it means to show up and accomplish a job every day. And these are skills that people can take in their lives elsewhere. And so every synagogue needs to look at themselves and see what else they can do and how they can open their doors. Just some ideas.
Thank you. I think what Michelle is saying, if there's any take-home point, there will be a million take-homes, but that is a huge one. I think that sort of challenging ourselves as a Jewish community on the shul level, on the JCC level, on the Federation. I remember years ago that Jerry Silverman, who was the head of the Jewish Federation, he had been the board president of Ramah, New England. Just like Rabbi Ain, his experience was playing softball with all the staff, including some Tikvah program members. And that's sort of what inspired him, and it made him ask those questions. And he said, we have to really, how many federations are employing people? And he said, it just as Michelle said, asking someone who's really strong and loves repetition and doing productive things to carry sidurim and set up benches is not demeaning at all. And same thing, these are really important jobs that need to get done. So if you're an employer or just a member of a synagogue, those are the important things to think about. I think we'll turn to Andre. Benji, if you want to ask some questions, since you guys know each other pretty well, you can, and I'll step off.
Thanks, Howard.
Thank you.
So Andre and I are friends from the Upper West Side, but also from Camp Ramah, Wisconsin. Andre, why don't you just introduce yourself, say how many summers you've been at camp and what your experience has been there.
Yeah, sure. My name is Andre Goldstein. I also live in the Upper West Side, and I've been going to Ramah for about, let's say, 5 years now. Technically 6, but we don't talk about 2020.
And what are some of the different roles you've had while at camp?
I was in Tikvah for 3 years, and then I started at JDAIM, which was the Voc Ed program, which I started first at JDAIM year. I was at the Warehouse Community Arts Center, and I was pretty much the secretary. I answered calls. I I greeted people, I cleaned up the place afterwards, also helped teach some classes.
And have those skills that you learned at some of those job placements at camp, have those been useful in your real life outside of camp?
Yeah, I answer the phone almost every day.
He's good at it. And what about Jewish things that you learned at camp? Can you tell me about some of those?
Well, I learned a bunch of Hebrew words, but I can't speak it properly.
And what about, did you try any new Jewish things while at camp?
Yeah, I learned how to tie tefillin.
That's great. Anything else you want to share with our community about how we could be more thoughtful about inclusion of people with different abilities in our community?
Yeah. If your community has individuals who have disabilities and you think they're being alienated in any way, please be more open-minded and include them in any way possible. And if there are individuals who can't get upstairs per se, please help them in any way you can. Just, me and Benji came up with this saying over the phone when we were talking about this exact thing. Don't act nice, be nice.
Don't act nice, be nice. There you have it. Thank you so much for being here, Andre.
Of course.
So I'll invite Jakey Pearson to come up. I saved Jakey for last because I probably know Jakey the longest because I was Jakey's bar mitzvah teacher. And I kind of broke with tradition. I don't usually try to recruit bar mitzvah students to come to camp, but couldn't resist because Jakey was awesome. And, you know, it's been a while. You're now an adult, and maybe you could just say where you live and what you do and all that. You could maybe take a rest for a second. Come closer, okay?
Yes, I started you bar mitzvah me, like, and I now went to a 2-year program in New Haven in 2009 and went through like their vocational program, graduated. Actually, before I graduated, moved into my own apartment and on Fountain Street, and I still live in the same apartment at the Towers or since that year.
We started off as neighbors in New York, and now we're neighbors in New Haven, Connecticut, which
Yeah,
is pretty cool.
yeah.
So camp was a long time ago for you. What are some of the things that you remember about camp? Some good memories or bad memories about camp?
Well, just getting used to going to camp from 2004, like, and just getting used to being away from home, because I was living at home at the time and still in middle school, like, and didn't go into high school yet, but I guess when I got further into like being done with middle school and then going into high school, I got used to the fact of that I wanted to go away somewhere else to school.
Thanks, Jakey. You know, you said something really important. I get a lot of those emails and calls from prospective families, and sometimes they'll say, you know, my child's 17 or 18, and I will sort of I'll tell them that camp is a great place for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is for the independence that you learn, and I'll remind parents that there's going to come a time that, you know, your kids will be adults, and you're not going to live forever, and they're going to need to be on their own or in some type of place, and you don't want their first overnight being when they're 30 years old. So I think a lot of people in our program, you're a great example.
Yeah.
You kind of got that confidence it was easy to be home. Your parents were awesome, and your sister's awesome, and being home is great.
Yeah.
And for you, I mean, of course, the camp activities were probably fun, but I think being apart and feeling comfortable.
But because I took the surrounding of friends, like and like and then just continued after that 1 year that I started, and then continued because I needed to use that as a like stone of like got used to, then continued, and then I'll continue the rest of why I got used to and wanted to be away from going to school somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, give you the confidence now you don't even want to come back to your parents in the city or your own place.
Yeah.
Let me ask, do you want to add anything, Leslie, about from a parent's perspective? You don't have to, about, the Jewish community. There's also, I know you've had a lot of involvement in the Jewish community over the years. Maybe you have any wisdom or perspective. Leslie?
I have to figure out how to be succinct, since we're going back a very long time. We're not particularly observant or participatory, in the Jewish world in an active way. However, I do have to say that there was other forces at work, because, in fact, Judaism and the Jewish community have supported our journey, my husband and I, and Jacob's and our daughter Emily's journey, to give Jacob the independent life. There were some very spooky, unusual, spiritual things that have happened along the way, even finding Howard initially, and connecting with him and creating a community where Jacob could feel safe and could get connected to Judaism in his own way. Doesn't mean he always comes with us to synagogue for the holidays, but that anchored him. I was very involved with the JCC on the Upper West Side, and created most of the programming initially there. That probably wouldn't have happened necessarily. I worked at the Jewish Board for 15 years and did programming there, and parents called me with questions about learning and child development. I was a social worker. I had a social work background, never worked as a social worker, worked in the business world, and as a result of Jacob, I actually found multiple communities that have meant a lot to me. And Jacob has benefited, of course, as a result of that. The fact that he lives independently, and I give a lot of credit to Howard initially, the flexibility of Ramah and Howard, because when Jacob first went to camp on that very first day, you think you probably remember, you said, I want to go to camp, but I don't want to sleep here. And I think I have to go home. And Howard said, okay, go home, but think about it. And if you want to come back, you can come back. And Howard helped find someone who Jacob could say goodnight to each night at camp. And after 4 agonizing days at home, with Jacob struggling and speaking to a mentor of mine who's a brilliant psychologist named Marcia Winokur, Jacob said, okay, I'll go back. Show me a camp, a system, a community that would let my child go home and struggle through and be embraced and welcomed back. And to talk about just one little woo-woo experience, the woman who Howard found to say goodnight to Jacob happened.
Right after you're done, I have like a few more why I started. Yeah.
Was a woman who knew about Jacob from birth, because he was the cousin of my best friend. She was the cousin of my best friend, and I didn't even know she was at camp. And so she became the surrogate mom. Anyway, it's hard for me to be succinct and brief, because, go ahead.
and just because of all of like this, why I went to camp also, I actually reconnected through going to Chapel Haven, friends that maybe I not have seen when I was at camp, but went to camp in 2004, then moved on to going to Chapel Haven, may have not have like gone through the 2 years at Chapel Haven or just went right into the community.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, you guys. So I feel like, so I feel like to sort of end things off, and I'm going to be a terrible guest because Rabbi knows that one of the things I do is teach bar bat mitzvah kids, and I'm going to go to a bat mitzvah in the neighborhood in a few minutes. I feel like we have all these Alexa and camp friends. Does anybody want to say anything about sort of the like inclusion from your perspective? Like, you know, what was challenging, what was wonderful, and what you think the Jewish community should take home. If anyone wants to say anything, you can come up and say something. No pressure, anybody. I think being here is kind of like, you know, nobody got paid to come here. You guys asked if you could come and be part of the guest list, so I think that kind of says it. And this is a long time ago. I mean, Alexa said she was 9 years old, and you guys are all post-college. So just thank you for being here. You want to, Veronica, you want to represent your, and Hannah?
Yes, we can represent our Vong. Oh. I'm Veronica.
I'm Hannah.
Hannah Blass. I guess all I can say, I feel very grateful for the Tikvah program and like having been at camp in such an inclusive environment. Alexa was in my bunk from Ilano basically like through the rest of camp. She did move on to be a dual citizen in Amit Sim and our ADA for a few years. But it's just so special to have connections with camp friends for a lifetime and see what everyone's doing and like the people they've grown into. So
Yeah.
it's been very special.
I think it was also really special just having, when we all started, we were 8 years old, me and a few other people in the crowd. And it was no big deal that Alexa was in our bunk. It was like everyone else started at that age. We were all really little, scared to be home, scared to be away from home. And it was not even any question. And that's what's really been so special about camp, that as we grow up, it's just around and it's the norm. So thank you. Thank you for hosting us.
So thank you. I think that the really take-home message is that just, you know, I mean, inclusion really benefits everybody. And thank you for being leaders in that, in your show. So thank you very much.
Howard, thank you so much. Okay. Thank you to all of our guests for being here. We're going to continue with the service. I do hope that the rest of you, if you're able, will stay till the end of the service and help lead a Don Olam at the end. Yes? Okay, awesome. If you'd like to learn more about the Tikvah program, I have Howard's contact information. I'm impressed that somebody who, what? Oh, right, we also need Alexa's card, exactly. I will make sure to get that. Howard, thank you. The Tikvah program continues to do incredible work. There is a Ramah bike ride and hike in Israel this May, but I actually don't want to promote our congregation going because it's over the time when the gala is, and I want you to come to the gala. But you can support the Ramah bike ride and hike, and the monies that are raised do support the Tikvah program at the different camps. So if you're interested in learning more about that, let us know. Like, really, thank you.